I'm just a regular programmer trying to lead a quiet life. But in a hospital hallway, I was cornered by a woman named Luna Evans. She looked at me like I was a long-lost, priceless treasure she'd finally found. She said my stomach was a wreck and that I needed her to take care of me. I was at the hospital again, picking up another prescription for my stomach. It's an old problem, a classic programmer's ailment. Coming out, I felt a little dizzy. I'd skipped lunch, and my blood sugar was crashing. I almost walked right into someone. It was a woman. She had the faint, clean scent of antiseptic mixed with a cold, unidentifiable perfume. Sorry, I mumbled out of instinct. No response. I looked up and saw a pale face. Her features were arresting. Not just pretty, but the kind of beautiful that makes your heart sink a little. She was staring at me, her eyes wide and unblinking. I couldn't quite describe her expression. It was as though you look at a stranger. It was more like how you'd look at someone you knew well who'd been gone for a very long time and had just walked back into your life. It was starting to give me the creeps. I tried to step around her. She suddenly spoke, her voice low and a little hoarse. Ethan Cole. I froze. She knew my name. I quickly ran through my entire contacts list in my head. I was positive I had never seen this face before. With her kind of presence, she'd be impossible to forget. I think you have the wrong person, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. She shook her head, slowly but with absolute certainty. I don't. I've been looking for you for 7 years. A chill went down my spine. 7 years. 7 years ago, I was buried in textbooks in college, stressing about my senior thesis. What is she talking about? Miss, I really don't know you, I said, getting ready to leave. She took a half step forward, perfectly blocking my path. You have stomach problems that I T-ax up all the time. You don't get to sleep until 3 in the morning. You love ice water, and you hate celery. I was paralyzed. Beside my mom and my best friend, nobody knew those details. Who the hell was she? Who are you? My voice turned cold. Luna Evans, she said, her eyes locked on mine. The name was a little old-fashioned, strangely cool. And how do you know all that about me? I know a lot more than that. A tiny, almost invisible smile touched her lips. You have a small, red birthmark on your left, but cheek, about the size of a grain of rice. A roaring sound filled my head as blood rushed to my face. That was a part of my body that, other than my mother when I was a baby, probably only I had ever seen. How could she possibly? My throat felt tight. I couldn't get a single word out. She leaned in a little closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, her breath brushing against my ear. Do you believe me now? I practically shoved her away. The movement was abrupt enough that a passing nurse glanced over at us. Luna didn't seem angry. She just stood there, watching me with that same look in her eyes. It was a look of conviction, like she was absolutely certain I couldn't get away. You've been investigating me? It was the only explanation I could think of. For 7 years, she shot back. I was speechless. Right, who would investigate a normal guy like me for 7 years? For what? My salary was good, but not mastermind a 7-year plot good. What do you want? To know you, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. And then, to be with you. I almost laughed out of sheer frustration. Lady, this is the 21st century. We don't do arranged marriages anymore. I don't know you, and I'm not interested, got it? The words were harsh. Her eyes darkened for a split second before returning to that deep, unreadable calm. Drinking ice water when your stomach hurts is a bad idea. With that, she held out a small, silver thermos. It's warm water. Drink some. I didn't take it. This was getting too weird. A strange woman who knows about the birthmark on your ass is now offering you warm water. Are you insane? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Maybe, she actually admitted. So you probably shouldn't provoke me. That sounded even more like a threat. I stared at her. Her expression was dead serious. This wasn't a joke. A genuine sense of fear started to creep in. This woman might actually be unstable. I wasn't touching this. I sidestepped her and walked quickly toward the hospital exit. She didn't try to stop me this time, but I could feel her gaze fixed on my back like a needle. At the entrance, I couldn't resist a glance over my shoulder. She was still standing there, the hallway light behind her casting a long, lonely shadow. She looked almost pathetic. I immediately crushed that thought. Pathetic? She was a stalker. A creep. I picked up my pace, almost jogging to the curb to hail an Uber. I jumped in, gave the driver my address, and told them to hurry. Only when the car was moving did I dare to breathe again. In the rearview mirror, I saw the figure at the hospital entrance shrink until we turned a corner and she was gone. I leaned back against the seat, feeling more exhausted than after a 3-day coding marathon. My palms were slick with sweat. The spot on my arm where she'd touched me felt like it was still faintly, coldly tingling. I closed my eyes, but all I could see was her face, her bottomless dark eyes. I've been looking for you for 7 years. 7 years. I'm 24 now. 7 years ago, I was 17, a senior in high school. My life back then was a boring cycle of studying for final exams and sneaking into video games. It was as plain as tap water. How could I possibly have crossed paths with her? She had to be mistaken. Yes, that had to be it. I tried to reassure myself, but the thought of that birthmark was like a thorn stuck in my mind. For the next few days, I was on edge. I kept making stupid mistakes in my code and zoning out during meetings. My colleague, Leo, threw an arm around my neck. "What's up, man? Bad breakup?" "Nothing to break up from," I said, shrugging him off. "Just ran into something weird." "Oh yeah, spill." I opened my mouth and closed it. What was I supposed to say? That some woman named Luna knows about a birthmark on my ass? Leo would laugh about that for the next decade. And besides, on some subconscious level, I felt like this was something I couldn't talk about. Like it was some kind of secret. After work, I purposely took the long way home, sticking to the busy main streets instead of my usual shortcut. I kept scanning the crowds, but I didn't see her. I felt a slight sense of relief. Maybe it was just a one-time freak encounter. I got back to my empty apartment. It was a 2-bedroom and a total mess. I couldn't be bothered to clean. I ordered some takeout on DoorDash and fired up my game console. After a few rounds of digital carnage, I finally started to relax. When the real world sucks, the virtual one is so much simpler. You just point and shoot. Later, I took a shower. The hot water felt good. I subconsciously reached back and felt for the spot on my left side. The small birthmark was there. How did she know? Could it be that we really did have a past? I racked my brain, trying to remember my 17-year-old self. The summer was brutally hot. The classrooms had no AC, just a few ceiling fans creaking overhead. I remember wearing a faded school shirt, my head buried in prep books all day. Occasionally, I'd look up and see the ponytail of the girl in front of me sway as she wrote. Beyond that, nothing. And definitely no one like Luna Evans. She didn't feel like a high school student. She had a kind of heavy stillness that felt far beyond her years. After my shower, my phone screen lit up. A text from an unknown number. "Remember to take your stomach medicine. And don't order from that barbecue place. It's too spicy." My fingers went ice cold. The takeout bag was still on my coffee table. It was from that exact barbecue place. How did she know? Where was she? I rushed to the window and yanked open the curtains. Below, the streetlights cast a dim, yellow glow, making the trees cast dancing shadows. I didn't see anyone, but I felt like somewhere in the darkness, a pair of eyes was watching me. A shiver ran down my spine. I drew the curtains, my heart pounding. This wasn't just weird anymore. This was a horror movie. I picked up my phone, ready to call the police. I dialed 911, but hesitated before hitting send. What would I tell them? That a woman was harassing me, that she knew about my birthmark and what I ordered for dinner. Where was the proof? Wouldn't they just think I was the crazy one? I deleted the text and blocked the number, but I couldn't settle down. I barely slept that night. Every little noise made me jump. Just before dawn, I finally drifted off. I dreamed I was back in that stuffy high school classroom, asleep at my desk. I felt someone gently touch my hair. I looked up and saw a blurry figure walking out the door. The person was wearing the school colors of Northwood High, the school across town, blue and white. Our school colors were green and gold. The figure was very thin. The next day I called in sick. I needed to figure this out. First, I had to confirm if she really knew. The 17-year-old me. I tore through my old boxes until I found my high school yearbook. The pages were yellowed, filled with the young, hopeful faces of my classmates. I scanned them one by one. Guys, girls. She wasn't there. Someone who looked like Luna Evans would have been impossible to miss in our school. Next, I pulled out the thick commemorative senior year photo album. Each student's picture had messages scrawled around it. Most of it was the usual, "Have a great summer," and "Don't be a stranger." I flipped through the pages. My fingers suddenly stopped. On the page with my photo, in the bottom right corner, there was a tiny line of text written in fine blue ink. The handwriting was neat, but unfamiliar. Found you. There was no signature. The date was 7 years ago, June 10th, the day after our final exams ended. The hair on my arms stood up. I had never noticed that message before. I probably flipped through the album once when I got it, and then tossed in a box. Who wrote it? Luna. Was she already? I stared at the words, my mind a tangled mess. The phone rang, making me jump. It was Leo. Ethan, you feeling better? Hey, we have an emergency. The client needs a data report like yesterday. I just emailed you the file. Can you take a look? Sure. I hung up and turned on my computer. I logged into my email and saw the message from Leo with an attached spreadsheet. I clicked download. My mind was somewhere else, and my hand trembled, knocking my coffee mug over. Brown liquid spilled across my keyboard. I frantically grabbed paper towels to clean up the mess. Suddenly, my computer screen went black. Then, a simple dialog box popped up in the center. White background, black text. Did you see the message? The blood froze in my veins. I stopped breathing. There was only one button below the text. Okay. I moved the mouse and clicked it. The dialog box vanished. The screen returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. But I knew it wasn't a hallucination. She could even get into my computer. This was hacking. I immediately unplugged the Ethernet cable and I shut down my laptop. I sat there in my chair, panting. Fear was slowly turning into anger. This was too much. Invading my privacy, stalking me, and now hacking my devices. I had to put an end to this. I plugged the cable back in and rebooted. I found the number I had blocked and sent a text. We need to meet. I'll pick the place. You pick the time. A few minutes later, a reply came. Okay, 8 p.m. tonight. Send me the address. I chose a coffee shop inside a busy mall. Lots of people. Safe. I got there half an hour early and picked a table by the window with a clear view of the entrance. I ordered an Americano, but didn't touch it. My hands were cold. At 7:50, she arrived. She was wearing a light gray trench coat, her hair tied back. She looked a little softer than she had at the hospital, but her eyes were the same. She walked straight to my table and sat down across from me. When the waiter came, she ordered a glass of lemonade. Did you hack my work computer? I asked, getting straight to the point. No, she answered calmly. I just put a little something on your phone. I froze. My phone. I pulled it out, turning it over and over in my hands. You won't see it, she said, taking a sip of her lemonade. It's a program I wrote myself. It's very discreet. That's illegal, I said, trying to keep my voice down, but I could feel my anger rising. I know, she replied, setting her glass down. So don't call the police. I was about to lose it at her completely unflappable attitude. Delete it. Right now, if I delete it, you won't see me again. The only reason I'm seeing you now is to get you to delete this damn thing. If I delete it now, you'll leave immediately, she said, looking at me. Do I have to wait another 7 years to see you again? Her tone was flat, but there was something in it that made my chest tighten. What exactly happened between us? I asked, trying to force myself to calm down. You really don't remember any of it? She asked. Her eyes held a flicker of hope, like a dying ember. I avoided her gaze. I don't. The only thing that happened when I was 17 was final exams. She was silent for a moment. Oh, it was just one word, but felt like that last ember had been extinguished. Maybe I remembered it wrong, she said. The sudden shift caught me off guard. You had the wrong person? Yeah, she said, her gaze drifting to the people walking past the window. Maybe. Her sudden compliance left me at a loss for words. Then, delete the program and stop following me. Okay. She took out her phone and tapped the screen a few times. Done. Just like that. Yes. I checked my phone, but of course, I couldn't see any difference. How can I trust you? You'll just have to, she said, looking back at me, her eyes seeming a little empty again. Ethan, if I were a bad person, you wouldn't have made it this far. That sounded even more terrifying, but strangely, I kind of believed her. She'd had plenty of opportunities to do something. Well, goodbye then, I said, standing up, ready to end this bizarre meeting. You have a bad stomach. You shouldn't drink iced coffee, she said suddenly. The Americano in front of me was untouched. Could you bring him a warm milk instead? She said to a passing waiter. Put on my tab. The waiter looked at me, confused. I just stood there, not sure if I should sit back down or just walk away. Sit, she said. Finish the milk, and I'll leave. I won't bother you again. Her voice was quiet but held a note of finality. For some reason, I found myself sitting back down. The warm milk arrived quickly, steam rising from the mug. My stomach was actually hurting a bit. I hadn't eaten properly. She stared out the window, lost in thought, her profile softened by the cafe lights. I didn't say a word, just sipped the milk. The warm liquid soothed my stomach. We sat like that in silence, like two strangers sharing a table. I finished the last drop. Okay, I said, putting the mug down. She turned her head and glanced at the empty mug. Okay. She stood up, didn't look at me again, and walked straight out of the cafe. The hem of her trench coat swished behind her. In a moment, she was gone. I sat there, feeling an odd emptiness in my chest. That was it. The mystery that had been tormenting me for days, solved just like that. It felt like punching a pillow. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. When I went to pay, the waiter told me the lady had already covered the bill, including my untouched coffee and the milk. Outside the mall, a cool night breeze hit me, and I shivered. I suddenly remembered the look in her eyes just before she left. It wasn't defeat. It was something else, something I couldn't name, but it definitely didn't feel like goodbye. The next week was completely quiet. No texts, no chance encounters, no more weird computer glitches. Life seemed to be back to normal. Work overtime, go home. Joking around with Leo, ordering terrible takeout. But something felt missing. A part of my mind felt like it was waiting for the other shoe to drop. On Friday night, Leo dragged me out for a drink. Dude, you've been in a funk all week. Seriously, did you get your heart broken? The bar was loud, the lights strobing. I took a long pull from my beer and said nothing. Come on, tell me about her. I'll give you my expert advice, Leo said with a wink. There's no girl. Don't lie. You've got lovesick puppy written all over your face. I touched my face. Did I? She's just a weird person, I mumbled. How weird? Ugly. No, on the contrary, she was beautiful. Unforgettably so. Bad personality? Super high maintenance? Not really. She was quiet, mostly. Her actions were just outside the norm. Then what's the problem? Leo slapped my shoulder. If you like her, go for it. If not, move on. It's simple. I opened my mouth, then swallowed the words. She knows about the birthmark on my ass. There was no way to explain it. I think she might have me confused with someone else, I said instead. Whoa, a mistaken identity plot. Leo was suddenly invested. That's wild. You should ask her which part of you reminds her of her dead, long-lost love. Shut up. I went back to my beer, but my mind was spinning. If she was mistaken, how could she know all those details? Especially the birthmark. A coincidence? It was too much of a coincidence. Hey, Leo nudged me. There's a hot girl over there who's been staring at you for a while. I looked up, following his gaze. In a dim corner booth, a solitary figure was sitting. She was wearing a simple black dress, holding a clear drink she wasn't drinking. Her eyes cut through the dancing crowd and landed directly on me. It was Luna. My heart skipped a beat. What was she doing here? Leo whistled. Damn, Ethan. You know someone like that? Introduce me. I ignored him, my eyes locked on Luna. She stared back, her expression unreadable. Then, she raised her glass in a slight, subtle gesture toward me. It was so natural, as if we'd planned to meet here. I instinctively started to raise my own glass, but stopped myself. She lowered hers, stood up, and walked toward the exit. She passed our table without breaking her stride, but she turned her head and gave me a quick, fleeting glance. Then she was out the door and gone, like a drop of water rejoining a river. Whoa, that girl is ice cold, Leo said, clicking his tongue. What did you do to her? I didn't answer. That empty feeling in my chest was back, and stronger this time. What did that look mean? It wasn't over. It was, I'm still here. I ran out after her. The street outside the bar was bustling, a chaos of neon lights and people. I looked left and right, searching for the figure in the black dress. There, across the street, standing under a bus stop sign. The streetlight cast a halo around her, creating a sharp silhouette. She looked like she was waiting for the bus. I crossed the street, slightly out of breath by the time I reached her. She saw me coming, but didn't seem surprised. Why did you come out? She asked. Why are you here? I countered. Just passing by. I saw you inside, so I went in for a bit. A coincidence. Yes, she nodded. Do you believe me? I didn't. This city was huge with thousands of bars. What were the chances she just happened to pass by this one and just happened to see me? You're still following me, I said, stating it as a fact. The program is gone, she said calmly. Believe it or not. Then how did you find me? Your scent, she said, tapping her nose. I recognize your scent. That was even creepier. I instinctively sniffed my shirt. All I could smell was smoke and stale beer. Luna, can we just be straight with each other for once? I was so tired of this. What do you really want? A bus pulled up then, hissing to a stop in front of us. The doors swung open. She didn't move. She looked at the bus, then back at me. I want to go home with you. My skin prickled. Whose home? Yours, she said, as if it were obvious. Or mine. Either is fine. Are you crazy? Probably, she said, stepping onto the bus. She paused and looked back at me. Are you getting on? I stood rooted to the spot. The driver honked impatiently. You coming or not? Luna gave me a faint smile. See you later, then. The doors closed behind her. The bus rumbled away, disappearing into the night. I stood on the sidewalk, watching its taillights fade. The autumn night wind was cold. I shivered. That smile. It wasn't a farewell. It was an invitation. Or maybe a warning. I didn't go back to the bar. I sent Leo a text saying something came up and then just wandered the streets. My head was a mess. Luna was an enigma. Every time I thought I was getting closer to an answer, she just became more confusing. Mistaken identity? It didn't feel right. Her persistence, the thing she knew. It was too specific. But if it wasn't a mistake, why couldn't I remember anything? What happened when I was 17? It was almost midnight by the time I got back to my apartment building. It was an old place with motion sensor lights in the hall that cast dim, flickering shadows. I fumbled for my keys to open the main door. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure sitting by the planters near the entrance. My heart seized. It couldn't be. I walked over slowly. In the moonlight, I could see clearly. It was Luna. She was sitting on the cold concrete ledge, her knees pulled to her chest, her head bowed. She looked like she was asleep. Or maybe, had she passed out? I crouched down and gently shook her shoulder. Luna, no response. A jolt of panic went through me. I reached out and checked for her breath. A warm puff of air brushed against my fingers. She was alive. I let out a sigh of relief. It was only then that I noticed how pale she was, her lips drained of color. She was still wearing that thin black dress. It was getting cold out. Had she been sitting here this whole time? I hesitated. I couldn't just leave her here. What if something happened to her? Gritting my teeth, I helped her up. She was surprisingly light, leaning against me with no resistance. Her hair brushed against my neck, and that cool, familiar scent filled my senses, mixed with the dampness of the night air. I managed to get her into the elevator and to my apartment door. I clumsily unlocked it and half carried her to the sofa. I turned on the lights and saw that she looked even worse up close. A fine sheen of cold sweat covered her forehead. I got her a glass of water and was about to wake her when I heard her murmur something incredibly faint. Cold. I sighed, resigned, and went to my bedroom to get a blanket. I covered her with it, then went to the bathroom to run a washcloth under warm water to wipe her face. As the cloth touched her forehead, her eyes snapped open. They were hazy at first, then focused sharply on me. Ethan. Her voice was weak. Yeah, I said, feeling awkward with the washcloth in my hand. You don't look so good. How are you feeling? She didn't answer, just stared at me. Her gaze was so deep it felt like it could pull me in. Then, she reached out and grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Don't go, she said. Just 2 words, but they were filled with an almost desperate plea. This was a completely different person from the calm, slightly unnerving Luna I knew. I froze. Her skin felt hot against mine. You have a fever, I said, instinctively placing my other hand on her forehead. It was burning up. She closed her eyes and leaned into my touch, like a small animal that had finally found shelter. The gesture hit a soft spot deep inside me I didn't know I had. I'll get you some medicine, I said, trying to pull my hand back. She held on tighter. Don't go, she repeated, her eyes cracking open. Stay here. I'm not leaving. The first aid kit is right over there, I said, pointing to the TV stand. She hesitated, then slowly released her grip, her eyes following me as I walked away. I found a fever reducer, popped out 2 pills according to the instructions, and brought them to her with the water. She struggled to sit up and obediently took the medicine, her eyes never leaving my face. Lie down and get some rest, I said, taking the empty glass. She lay back down, pulling the blanket up, but her eyes stayed open. You have to close your eyes to rest, I told her. She blinked, her long lashes fluttering. If I close my eyes, will you leave? No, I said, at least not until your fever breaks. She seemed reassured by that and slowly closed her eyes. Her breathing soon evened out into a deep, steady rhythm. I sat on the armchair nearby, watching her sleep. Without her usual cool, mysterious guard up, she looked vulnerable. Her features were delicate, her lips perfectly shaped. She really was a beautiful woman. If we had met in any other, more normal way, maybe. I cut off my own train of thought. I picked up my phone to check the time and saw an unread text. It was from an hour ago, from that familiar number I'd unblocked. If I got sick, would you take care of me? The timestamp was from right after I caught up to her at the bus stop. So, her showing up outside my building wasn't a coincidence. She had counted on me being a decent human being. The thought sent a chill down my spine. I looked at the woman sleeping on my couch. Who are you, really? I ended up sitting in that armchair all night. I checked her temperature a few times, and by morning, the fever had finally broken. She was sleeping soundly, the tension gone from her brow. I was exhausted, my eyes bloodshot and my back aching. I tiptoed to the bathroom to wash up. Looking at my haggard reflection in the mirror, I couldn't help but wonder what my life had become, getting turned upside down by a woman I barely knew. When I came out, she was awake, sitting up on the couch. The blanket was folded neatly beside her. She looked much better. You're awake. How are you feeling? I asked, trying to sound casual. Better, she said, looking at me. Thank you for taking care of me. No problem. I paused. Were you waiting for me outside my building on purpose last night? She didn't deny it. And you sent that text on purpose? Yes. A little damsel in distress act. She thought for a moment, then nodded. I guess you could call it that. Her honesty was so blunt it disarmed my anger. What? I wanted to see if you'd take pity on me, she said, her eyes fixed on mine. It looks like you did. I just didn't want a dead body on my conscience. A small smile played on her lips, but she didn't argue. Are you hungry? She asked. A little. I'll make breakfast, she said, standing up and walking toward my kitchen as if she owned the place. Wait. I stopped her. I don't have any food. And besides, wasn't this a little too familiar? She opened my fridge. It was, as expected, empty except for a few beers and an expired yogurt. There's a grocery store downstairs. I'll go get something, she said, heading for the door. You don't have to do that, I said quickly. I can just order something. She stopped and turned to face me. Ethan, are you afraid of me? I'm not afraid, I'm just... What was I? I was unsettled. I was trying to maintain some kind of boundary. She walked back until she was standing right in front of me, so close I could smell the scent of my own body wash on her skin. She used my shower? I will never hurt you, she said, looking me straight in the eye. Ever. How can you promise that? With the 7 years I spent looking for you, she said. If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have waited this long. She had a point, but it still didn't put me at ease. Let's make a deal, she said suddenly. What kind of deal? Let me stay here and take care of you for a while. What? Your stomach issues, your bad habits. You're a mess. You need someone to look after you. I don't need that. You do, she insisted. And in exchange, I'll tell you everything I know. My heart sped up. About the things I've forgotten. Yes, she nodded, but it might not be the story you're imagining. What is it then? I'll tell you when you agree to let me stay, she said, leaving me hanging. I looked into her eyes. They were a complex mix of determination, exhaustion, and a deep, undecipherable sadness. Against my better judgment, I heard myself say, just for a little while. Her eyes lit up like a stone had been tossed into a still, dark pool, creating ripples of light. Okay, 10, and just like that, Luna moved into the guest room. I laid down the law. No entering my bedroom, no touching my computer, and absolutely no more stalking. She agreed to everything, surprisingly cooperative. She really did start taking care of me, and she was almost too good at it. Every morning, I'd wake up to a home-cooked breakfast on the table. Something different every day, always light and delicious. I hadn't eaten a real breakfast at home in years. She'd pack me a lunch for work, reminding me to actually eat it. When I got home from work, the apartment was no longer a quiet, empty space. There were sounds from the kitchen, the smell of food cooking. It was jarring at first, a total invasion of my personal space. But she was good at keeping her distance. Aside from necessary conversation, she was quiet, spending most of her time in the guest room or reading on the couch. Her presence was subtle, yet everywhere. My stomach actually started to feel better. Under her watchful eye, I couldn't stay up until 3 a.m. anymore. I was forced into a healthy lifestyle. One day, Leo stopped by to pick up a file and saw Luna, wearing an apron, emerge from the kitchen. His jaw hit the floor. "Dude, you're shacking up with a supermodel, and you didn't tell me." "It's not like that. She's just staying here temporarily." Temporarily? Who temporarily stays with someone and becomes their personal chef? Leo said with a smirk. "Nice work, man. You got skills." I didn't bother trying to explain. I couldn't explain it, even to myself. The days passed in a strange, peaceful rhythm. Sometimes I try to ask her about the past, but she'd always say, "It's not time yet. When will it be time? When you stop being so wary of me." I couldn't argue with that. I was still wary of her. The mystery hadn't been solved. It had just been put on pause. One Friday night, I had to work late. It was almost 11 when I got home. The living room light was on. Luna was curled up on the couch, asleep, her knees hugged to her chest. The TV was on, muttering some late-night news program. The soft light softened the angles of her face. She looked like a normal girl, waiting for someone to come home. Something in my chest stirred. I moved quietly, planning to get a blanket to cover her. As I got closer, I noticed the corners of her eyes were damp. It looked like she had been crying. I froze. She cried. In my mind, she was always so stoic, so emotionless. What could possibly make her sad? As I stood there, wondering if I should wake her, she stirred and opened her eyes. She saw me and rubbed them, her voice thick with sleep. "You're back." "Yeah." I pointed at the TV. "Why not sleep in your bed?" "I was waiting up and I guess I fell asleep," she said, standing up. "Did you eat?" "There's still some soup in the pot." "I ate at the office," I said, watching her turn away. "Are you okay?" She stopped but didn't turn around. "I'm fine." "Really?" She was silent for a few seconds, then turned back to me, her expression once again calm. "Today is the anniversary of my parents' death." I was stunned. I never would have guessed that. "I'm so sorry." "I didn't know. It was a long time ago," she said quietly. "I'm going to bed. You should get some rest, too." She disappeared into the guest room and closed the door. I stood in the living room, a strange feeling churning inside me. I'd always seen her as this mysterious, even intimidating figure. I'd forgotten that she might have her own pain, her own history. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. I kept thinking about the tears on her sleeping face. I thought about the heavy weariness in her voice when she said she'd been looking for me for 7 years. I've been too harsh with her. Maybe she really didn't mean any harm. Maybe that past I'd forgotten was incredibly important to her. For the first time, I felt a genuine desire to know what had happened. Not out of fear or curiosity, but to understand her. 11 the weekend was bright and sunny. When I got up, Luna had already made breakfast and was sitting on a lounge chair on the balcony, soaking up the sun with her eyes closed, looking completely relaxed. After I ate, I walked out to the balcony. "Do you have any plans today?" I asked. She opened her eyes, surprised that I was initiating a conversation. "No, want to go for a walk?" I suggested. She seemed even more surprised, studying my face for a few seconds before nodding. "Okay." We drove out to a wetlands park on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't crowded and the air was fresh. We walked along the wooden boardwalk, flanked by reeds and still water. We didn't have a destination, just wandered. It was a little awkward at first. Then she let out a soft, "oh," as a bird skimmed across the water. "That's an egret," she said. "You know your birds?" "Yeah, I used to see them in my hometown." It was the first time she'd ever mentioned her past. "Where are you from?" I asked casually. "A small town, far from here," she said, clearly not wanting to elaborate. "Oh." We walked a bit further in silence. "Ethan," she said suddenly. "Yeah. If, and this is a big if one day you found out I'd lied to you, what would you do?" My stomach clenched. "Depends on the lie, I guess." A very big lie, she said, staring straight ahead. About who I am. About how we met. I stopped walking. She stopped too, turning to face me. The sunlight fractured in her eyes, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow. Why would you lie? Because if I told you the truth from the start, you never would have let me get close to you, she answered, her honesty unflinching. And now? Can you tell me the truth now? She hesitated, just a little longer. What are you waiting for? For you to like me. Just a little bit. Her directness was startling. I could feel my ears getting hot. I know. She cut me off, starting to walk again. That's why I'm waiting. I followed behind her, watching her slender but straight back. My mind was a mess. Like her. That was a heavy word. Right now, my feelings were a confusing mix of curiosity, a strange sort of sympathy, and a reluctant acceptance. It was a long way from like, but it wasn't hate either. We sat on a park bench for a while, watching fish swim in the pond below. It was quiet, but the tension between us had eased. On the way back, we passed a cotton candy vendor. I saw her glance at it for a second too long. I walked over, bought the biggest one they had, a swirl of pink and white, and handed it to her. She took it, stunned for a moment, and then she smiled. Not one of her faint, mysterious smiles, but a real one that crinkled her eyes and showed a hint of her teeth. It was beautiful. Thank you, she whispered, holding it like it was a precious jewel. In that moment, she didn't seem like the enigmatic Luna Evans. She just seemed like a normal girl, happy over a simple piece of cotton candy. And somewhere deep inside me, that wall I'd built up cracked just a little bit more. This peaceful routine continued for about 2 weeks. My stomach problems had vanished, and I was sleeping better. I'd even gained a few pounds. Luna was the perfect caretaker, like something out of a fairy tale. But the alarm bells in my head hadn't completely silenced. The more normal she acted, the more I felt a sense of unease. Was this the calm before the storm? One afternoon, I left work early to grab a flash drive I'd forgotten. The apartment was quiet when I let myself in. I assumed she was out, but as I walked through the living room, I heard a faint noise from the guest room. The door was slightly ajar. On instinct, I peered inside. She was sitting at the desk, a desk I never used, with her back to the door. She seemed to be writing something, completely absorbed. Then I saw her pick up a picture frame from the desk. It was my solo photo from my high school graduation, me in a dorky shirt, grinning like an idiot. She traced the outline of my face on the photo with her finger. The gesture was so gentle it made my heart ache. Then, she bowed her head and pressed the frame softly against her forehead, a silent gesture of devotion. I held my breath, afraid to move. After a long moment, she put the frame down, carefully setting it back in its place. Then, she turned around. Our eyes met. She froze, a flash of panic on her face, before she quickly composed herself. You're home early. Forgot something, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What are you doing? Just organizing, she said, standing up and blocking my view of the desk. Your flash drive is on the TV stand. I walked over and picked it up, my mind reeling. That image of her with my photo was burned into my brain. That look of almost religious reverence. No, it was more than that. It was an emotion so thick and complex I couldn't name it. I turned back to her. She was watching me, a nervous tension in her eyes, as if she were awaiting a verdict. That photo, I started. Do you look at it often? She bit her lip, but didn't deny it. Why? Because. She looked down. That's the last way I remember you. The last way, what did that mean? Is there something wrong with how I am now? No, she said, looking up, her gaze complicated. You're better. But it feels a little unreal. She took a few steps closer. The you from now buys me cotton candy. He goes to the park with me. He lets me stay with him. Is that a bad thing? It's a good thing. Too good, she said, her voice dropping. So good it feels like stolen time. I'm always afraid it's going to disappear. She was standing right in front of me now. I could see her eyelashes trembling. Ethan, can you hug me? She asked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her voice a desperate plea. Just once. I was paralyzed. Hug her. This crossed the line. This was not a safe distance. But looking at her, so fragile and exposed, and thinking about how she'd looked at that photograph, I couldn't bring myself to say no. After a few seconds of internal struggle, I sighed and wrapped my arms lightly around her shoulders. Her body tensed for a second, then melted into me. She rested her head against my chest. Her embrace was light, restrained, but I could feel her trembling, like a bird, cold and lost, that had finally found warmth. Her arms slowly came around my waist and held on tight. We stood there like that, in the quiet living room. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows on the floor. I could smell the scent of her hair, feel the warmth of her body, the slight tremor running through her. And the wall I had built around my heart, it felt like it had just cracked open. The hug lasted for maybe 10 seconds, or maybe longer. Time seemed to slow down. I could feel the rhythm of her heartbeat against my chest, a little too fast, mingling with my own until I couldn't tell them apart. She was the one who let go first. She took a small step back, her head down, the tips of her ears bright red. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't say anything. My throat was dry. The silence in the living room was filled only by the sound of our breathing. It was awkward, but something had shifted. The wall of ice between us had a definite crack in it. I'll go make dinner," she said, turning quickly toward the kitchen. "Okay." I stood there for a moment, my hand on my chest where her head had rested. Her warmth seemed to linger there. It felt unreal. Dinner that night was a little strange. Neither of us mentioned what happened. She quietly ate her food, and I ate mine. But whenever our eyes met, we'd both quickly look away, like two teenagers with a crush. The feeling was new, but not bad. "Do you have any plans for the weekend?" she asked suddenly. "No, probably just stay home and code." Oh, she paused. "Well, do you want to see a movie? There's a new one out. It has pretty good reviews." She immediately looked down at her plate, pushing rice around with her chopsticks, as if the question had taken all her courage. I looked at the top of her head, at the little whirl in her hair, and felt something shift inside me. "What kind of movie?" "I think it's a romance," she said, her voice even quieter. I almost smiled. A romance. With her, the idea was bizarre, but for some reason, I nodded. "Sure." Her head snapped up, her eyes bright for a second before she quickly tried to look nonchalant. "Okay, I'll buy the tickets." "Yeah." For the rest of the meal, the air felt a little sweeter. The next afternoon, we went to the movies. She wore a light blue dress and had her hair down, which made her look softer than usual. I, of course, was in my standard t-shirt and jeans. We got the tickets, bought popcorn, and a Coke. It all felt so normal, but having her next to me made everything feel different. The theater was full of couples. We blended right in. The movie was cheesy, a classic story of a couple who breaks up over a misunderstanding and gets back together. During a sad part, I could hear a girl nearby sniffling. I was distracted. My eyes kept drifting over to Luna. She was watching the movie intently, her face illuminated by the flickering light of the screen. We were sharing a bucket of popcorn, and our hands would occasionally brush. Each time, we'd both pull back like we'd been shocked. Then one time, I didn't pull back. Her fingers, reaching for popcorn, touched mine and paused. Then, slowly, her pinky finger hooked around mine. It was a small, shy gesture. Her palm was a little damp. I couldn't tell if it was her sweat or mine. I didn't move. I just let her hold on. It felt like some kind of secret pact. I have no idea what happened in the second half of the movie. All my focus was on my right hand, on the tiny point of contact that felt like it was on fire. When the movie ended and the lights came up, she quickly let go, pretending to fix her hair. Her ears were red again. I looked down at my hand, at the finger where her warmth still seemed to linger. "Let's go," I said, standing up. "Okay." The lobby was crowded. I instinctively turned and shielded her from the jostling people. Her hand reached out and grabbed the hem of my shirt, like a little kid afraid of getting lost. I didn't look back, but I slowed my pace so she could keep up. Outside, the sun had set and the city lights were on. The evening breeze felt good. "Was the movie okay?" she asked. "It was fine," I said, even though I'd barely watched it. "Oh." We walked in silence for a bit. "Do you want to hold hands?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was quiet but clear. I stopped and looked at her. She was looking up at me, her eyes shining in the streetlight, a mix of hope and nervousness, like a kid asking for candy. I sighed and held out my hand. "Yeah, okay." She immediately put her hand in mine, her fingers lacing through mine and gripping tight, as if she was afraid I'd change my mind. "Let's go," I said, squeezing her hand as we started walking. Her hand was small and soft, a perfect fit in mine. We walked down the busy street, holding hands, just like 1,000 other couples. No one knew about the 7 years of silence between us, or the strange way our story began. And in that moment, it felt like none of it mattered. Holding hands was like flipping a switch. After that, things got domestic. I'd find myself kissing her forehead before I left for work. She'd text me when I was working late to ask what I wanted for dinner. Our apartment slowly filled with couples' items. Matching mugs, matching slippers. The next time Leo came over, he saw the 2 pairs of slippers by the door and just shook his head. I can't watch this. Ethan Cole, you've gone soft. I playfully kicked him out the door and turned to see Luna hiding a smile in the kitchen. Life felt like it was floating in honey. It was so sweet, it was almost unreal. But that little knot of unease was still in my gut. The past. The 7 years. She never brought it up, and I never asked. I think we were both afraid that talking about it would shatter the peace we'd found. Then one night, we were curled up on the couch watching an old movie. It was a slow one, and she fell asleep with her head on my shoulder. I carefully shifted to make her more comfortable. As I did, my fingers brushed against the back of her neck. Pushing her hair aside, I saw it, a faint, white scar about an inch long, hidden just below her hairline. My hand froze. That scar. Fragmented images flashed in my mind. A hot summer day, the sound of cicadas buzzing, an argument by the basketball courts, the sound of shattering glass, and a girl crying. It was all blurry, like looking through frosted glass, but my heart gave a painful throb. The feeling was awful. I gently laid her down on the couch and covered her with a blanket. I went out to the balcony and lit a cigarette. The night air was cool. I tried to piece together the summer. I was 17. The memories were like scattered beads from a broken string. But the feeling of dread was real. Was that scar because of me? Why are you smoking? Her voice came from behind me. I turned. She was rubbing her eyes as she walked over. Did I wake you? No, she said, leaning on the railing next to me. Bad dream. No, I said, putting out the cigarette. Just remembering something. What? I looked at her face, illuminated by the moonlight, and hesitated. I pointed to the back of her neck. That scar. How did you get it? Her body went rigid for a split second. Her eyes darted away. When I was a kid, I fell. Really? I looked at her. Did it have something to do with me? She went silent. The wind blew her hair across her face, hiding her expression. If I said yes, she finally said, looking up at me, would you remember? I can't, I said honestly. Just broken pieces. She stared at me for a long time, then let out a soft sigh. Then it's better if you don't. It wasn't a good memory. Her voice was filled with a weary relief. I care more about having you now, and in the future, than I do about the past. She reached out and took my hand. Ethan, let's not think about it anymore. Okay, let's just look forward. I looked into her eyes and saw concern, a plea, and something else I couldn't quite decipher. Fear. What happened that summer? What was so bad that she'd rather I never remember it? I squeezed her hand and pulled her into a hug. Okay, we won't think about it. She buried her face in my chest, her arms wrapped tightly around my waist. She was trembling slightly. I told myself to let it go. If it was a scar, it was better not to reopen the wound. The important thing was now. She was here in my arms. That was enough. Near the end of fall, I had to go out of town for a week for a project. The night before I left, she was acting strange. Extra clingy. She was helping me pack, but she was so slow, folding and refolding the same t-shirt for minutes. I wrapped my arms around her from behind. What's wrong? Gonna miss me? She didn't speak, just turned and buried her face in my chest. Come back soon. I will. A week will fly by. We have to video chat every day. Deal. And you're not allowed to talk to other girls. I laughed and tilted her chin up for a kiss. Who would want a nerd like me besides you? I do, she whispered, her eyes completely serious. My heart melted. I know. I'm leaving the fort in your hands. On the way to the airport, she held my hand and didn't let go. At the security gate, her eyes were red. I'm off, I said, ruffling her hair. Okay. I turned and walked through the gate. After a few steps, I looked back. She was still standing there, waving at me. She looked so small and lonely. I couldn't help but smile, a bittersweet ache in my chest. The week away was harder than I expected. The hotel room felt huge and empty. The business dinners were a bore. Our video calls every night were the only thing I looked forward to. She'd chatter about what she cooked, how the neighbor's cat had kittens, the new plant she bought for the apartment. It was all so simple, so warm. Looking at her face on the screen, I understood for the first time what it meant to be homesick. The day the project wrapped, I changed my flight to the earliest one home. I didn't tell her. I wanted to surprise her. I got back in the afternoon. The building was quiet. I used my key, opening the door as silently as I could. The living room was empty, spotlessly clean. The balcony door was open, the curtains fluttering in the breeze. I heard a faint sound coming from the guest room. I set my bag down and walked over. The door was ajar. She was sitting at the desk, her back to me. In her hands was my high school yearbook. She was holding a very fine-tipped pen, carefully writing something on one of the pages. She was completely focused. The scene was almost identical to the last time I caught her. But this time, she wasn't just looking at the photo. She was writing. My heart skipped a beat. I gently pushed the door open. She heard the sound and whipped her head around. Panic flashed across her face when she saw me. You're back. She instinctively tried to close the book, but I had already seen it. The page she was writing on was mine. Below the original message, "Found you," she had added a new line of text. The ink was still wet. "I won't lose you again." I stood there, staring at her panicked eyes, at the new words on the page. It felt like something had slammed into my chest, a feeling that was both painful and incredibly warm. I walked over and picked up the yearbook. My fingers traced over the 2 lines of text. 7 years. She had really, truly looked for me for 7 years. And I had forgotten her completely. "Luna," I said, my voice hoarse. She looked at me, terrified, like she was bracing for a blow. I closed the book and set it down. Then I reached out and pulled her in my arms, holding her tight, tighter than I ever had before. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry it took you so long. I'm sorry I forgot." She was stiff in my arms for a moment. Then she relaxed, her arms wrapping around my back, holding on just as tightly. "You remember?" Her voice was muffled against my shirt. "No," I said honestly, "but I know I was wrong." She shook her head, pressing her face deeper into my chest. "You're back. That's all that matters." We just stood there and held each other in the sunlit room. The past was a distant fog, but the warmth in my arms was real. "Ethan, yeah, I love you." She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, but shining. Since I was 17, until now, I looked into her eyes, at the emotions swirling there, as potent and deep as aged wine. I lowered my head and kissed her. This kiss was different from all the others. It was filled with apology, with tenderness, and with the feeling of finally being home. "I love you too," I whispered against her lips. "I know I'm late, but for every day from now on, I'll be here." In the end, I never fully remembered what happened when I was 17. There were just shadows. A quiet girl from a school across town. A brief connection. Some kind of accident. But none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was now. The next spring, I proposed. I didn't do anything fancy. It was just a normal night at home. She made a huge dinner, and at the bottom of my bowl, under the last spoonful of rice, was a ring. As she stared at it in shock, I got down on one knee. "Luna Evans, marry me. From now on, it's my turn to look for you. For the rest of my life." She cried and laughed at the same time, nodding furiously. We had a small wedding, just our closest friends. Leo was my best man and cried harder than she did, saying he'd finally managed to marry me off. She doesn't have to be so careful anymore. She can openly nag me about my health, shoving pills in my mouth while my stomach acts up. We argue over who has to do the dishes. I come home late from work to find a light left on for me, and soup warming on the stove. Those 7 years she spent searching feel like a long, dark river we had cross. But we finally reached the shore. One day, while cleaning, I found the old yearbook again. I opened it to my page and looked at the 2 lines of text. "Found you. I won't lose you again." I picked up a pen, and underneath her words, I carefully added a 3rd line. "Okay, it's a deal." I signed my name, Ethan Cole. Closing the book, I walked out to the balcony. She was hanging laundry, the sun lighting up her hair like a halo. I walked up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. She laughed and tried to wipe her wet hands on my face. "What do you want for dinner?" she asked. "Anything you make." A gentle breeze drifted up from the street below, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass. Life was quiet. Life was good. The greatest happiness, I realized, was just a normal day, as long as it was with her.